So how I managed the 30 days, it would not be a 30-day fast. It was more like 30 days of fasting, which meant that even if I go for 5 days of dry fast or 5 days of consuming only liquids, when I do break it, I will break it and sort of start afresh again. But when I do break it, I will probably eat fruits once again to replenish, to get the nourishment, to get the vitamins, to get going. Emotional triggers, those are some of the things that you gotta be careful about. There's a lot of emotional battles along the way because it is gruesome, guys. It is not easy. I experienced a time when I was like, and I kind of find myself having a lot of triggers of frustration or just an angst, just sort of like, to hell with this fast, man. Why am I even fasting? Just like you start losing focus of what the purpose is. It almost felt like a spiritual battle of, something that deterred me from what I was doing. That's why I'm saying that, sometimes it's a time to kind of really confront yourself with a lot of things. And that's when you really have to kind of pull yourself together. Pull yourself together. Don't lose sight of why you're fasting. And I will tell you a little bit later on about why I was fasting. There's a lot of times where I found myself also having those emotional triggers and frustration. It could be something that's unrelated to fasting, but it sort of deters you from just breaking it and forgetting about it. And you're like, what's the point of doing all of this anyway? And I think that's very contrast. It contrasts with what Jesus was going through as well. Even though the fasting was temporary, praying is continuous. So you have to keep on praying because that's the only thing that will keep us intact and focus on what the main purpose and the goal of going through that process is. So be careful. Don't be triggered to relapse. Those are some of the lessons that I learned and the results that I got. But further, to really break it down more with lessons that I learned immensely that it's not really about the food. Food is just really one minor aspect of it, but the bigger portion of it is food was really never the focus, but the focus was on God and trying to find my space with God and focusing my day on God. And that's really the main focus, is to remove myself from any distraction or anything that I might value. So food is a physical thing that we need, but we replace that in place of the spirituality aspect of God's presence that we greatly need in our lives. So another segment that I want to talk about that I think is important is avoiding conflicts. Now, a lot of times I notice that churches do fast. Some churches go through a period where they'll fast for different reasons, or a period of fasting. I know in Islam, they also do that. There's the month of Ramadan. How to avoid conflicts with that? I'm not going to try and focus on whether or not you should do that or not, but I'm going to try and advise you on how best to sort of navigate things like that. How to avoid individual fasting and church fasting, or having a consensus about how to go about fasting, because as I said, there are risks involved. And so when you do go through that process, if you're a congregation, it's best to kind of leave it open for people to sort of go through that process of focusing on what the prayer session is about, as opposed to the fasting. I would advise you to not focus on the fasting aspect, even though we are going through a process of fasting, but focus a lot more on the purpose, the themes, the reason for going through that prayerful session. Because we are inviting ourselves into God's presence. We are inviting ourselves to partake and participate in a process where we are communicating with God, and we are supplicating ourselves, our desires, or having an objective, and having God being part of that. I think it's important to maintain those principles and those guidelines, so that sometimes people don't just kind of fast and don't really pray as much. Then it kind of loses its sense of purpose and meaningfulness. So it's important to sort of design a plan or a methodology around that, not to avoid conflict between two things, whereby someone might not be feeling like they're in a space to kind of go through fasting, and the church is kind of going through a fasting process. I don't know how people will kind of navigate that, but that's also something that I think it's important to kind of study together and have a consensus and a plan and an agreement about some things. Yeah, so then also just don't make people feel guilty or feeling like they're sinning if they don't fast, if they eat or they break it or whatever the case might be. because it does happen where people kind of feel like, oh my God, no, oh, I've sinned, I'm terrible, I didn't fast with the church. So if individuals have their own personal approaches, let's embrace that as well. So you can understand the need and what you're trying to achieve together as a church. The oneness is in the purpose and the prayerfulness. So with that said, avoid fasting under compulsion. There has to be a reason. Don't create reasons. Let there be reasons. Okay, let the circumstances speak for themselves. It's mostly important to build on the relationship aspect and unity of the church than to sort of like just create a whole bunch of fancy programs where we kind of like, it feels like it's a fancy thing. We got to be careful around how we orientate each other around this topic. We just need to be careful about how we go about it. Tread carefully. So focus on the purpose, not the plate. Food simply reminds us of denial of the physical in search of the spirituality. But that's not the only way to go about it. So it's important to remember that. Finally, what was I praying for? I'm sure a lot of you are kind of like wondering, okay, dude, what did you do? Ooh. Okay, what was I fasting for? It was really more a personal thing, but I'll share it with you anyway for the sake of inspiration. It might be encouraging to somebody. So at that point in time of my life, I was 26 years old. My friends were in relationships. Some were getting married or some were already married. And I was in a point in time of my life where I was like, if I really want to get into a relationship and get married, I really wanted to be for the right reason and for the right purpose. And because of what I've seen around myself, there were some examples that aren't really, really great examples. That kind of taught me a lot about the importance of getting married, but for godly reasons and spiritual purposes. And if I want to get to that point, I want it for the right reasons. So then I decided to go into that process of praying. How do I say it? So I decided to pray to God to find the right person. So I went into a prayerful session of about 32 days. It was supposed to be 30 days. It ended up being 32 days because it was a weekend. So I decided to break it on Sunday. So Jesus fast was in the desert. So I decided to put myself in that place and in that space where, I was prepared to go into a process where I'm going to expect the unexpected. So Jesus fast in the desert prepared him to meet unforeseen circumstances and unforeseen challenges. But unforeseen doesn't necessarily mean unexpected. There are things that you'll meet along the way that you don't necessarily expect. All right. Now, I'm not so naive to suggest that I thought that praying God was going to give me a wife. Okay, now that's not what I was praying for. What I was praying for was I subdivided that into different segments and different sections. That had to do a lot with confronting myself about a lot of things, about what my perceptions were about marriage, what I was expecting from marriage, what I wanted from marriage, what I was expecting from the other person, whoever that significant other would be. I had to confront myself. It was a process of having to really question myself about what I wanted as a man and as a Christian and what purpose it serves on top of that. And, go all out, talk about everything and really be open with God about what it is that you really want and who are you as a person and where are you at that point in time and space. Leave myself vulnerable to really seek an intimate conversation with God about what it is that I was expecting and wanted. And whatever it is that I come across that I may not have anticipated or expect, to be open-minded, and whoever you meet along the way in life, and having a watchful eye of try to understand how God's plan works out in everything that you experience. Because let's face it, as people, as guys as well, as ladies too, everybody has ideas of what they want, dreamy ideas about what we want, what we're expecting, what type of girl, what type of guy you want. And I really put that out there, to kind of like really confront myself about what it is that I want. What am I really looking for? Am I looking for a good person, or am I looking for a beautiful, physically beautiful person, or whatever the case may be? And sometimes people will sort of like try and dodge that and be like, both. I think there comes a point in time where, let's just say, what I learned out of that process was it put me in a position where I kind of found myself in a situation where I value having a relationship with God more and pleasing Him and doing His will or living according to His purpose and plan for me, and trying to understand what that is, than focusing on what I thought I wanted then. And that's what it groomed me for, to a point where I have high respect for marriage, and I will not take a relationship for granted, because I've seen and noticed that a lot of people take relationships for granted because we approach relationships from a very self-centered, selfish point of view. And I think that's part of the process that I learned, is that I grew into all these other different things that I experienced, a different process than what I kind of bargained for. And I'm at a point of my life right now where it doesn't really matter if I get married or not. But if I do, then I wouldn't want it to substitute that love and passion that I have for the gospel, and that love and passion that I have for continuing to have an intimate relationship with God. So if marriage takes me away from that, then it wouldn't really make sense much. But because I don't feel like I need to pursue that, then I'm good with that, It has got me to kind of realize that there's a lot more things that are more important in life than marriage or dating or relationships. And that's what I kind of learned out of that. I think that I took a lot. I grew into that space. Not what I kind of had in mind or expected, but I think having to reflect throughout all those years, that's what I learned. So not to ramble on and on and on about this video. I don't know how long it's going to be, but anyway, I want it to be as short as possible. The result of it all is I had a much deeper understanding of a kingdom-filled relationship with God, and a kingdom-filled understanding of what marriage is. Now, the final thing I'm going to talk about with you guys is, how do you break a fast? I think a lot of people don't even know that there are reasons to break a fast, and there are ways to break a fast. There are ways of going about it. Take it easy when you break it, especially if you're fasting for a lengthy period of time. If it's a dry fast, or you were drinking, it's not a dry fast, or you're eating certain types of foods, or whatever the case may be. I was just hinted not so long ago that eating fruits, it's called the Daniel fast. Daniel fast. I didn't know there was a name to it, but anyway. Now, when you do break your fast, do take it easy. Know the types of foods that you should eat. Not foods that are too sweet, not foods that are too protein heavy. Because, especially meat, do not consume meat because it takes a lot to digest meat. There's a story of a man who broke his fast and ate a whole chicken, and he died. I'm not kidding. So that's because meat is protein heavy. So do not eat foods that are hard to digest, because your bowels need to sort of build into that. And why I say don't eat sweet things, I've noticed from personal experience as well, that when you eat sugary things, foods that are sugar heavy, okay, that can result in food poisoning as well, because sugar is quite dangerous. It's extreme. It's like, oh my God, it's like a flame to your body, except it's an internal flame. It inflames a lot of things. For some reason, when I was fasting, I was craving, the one thing that I was craving the most was bakery. I don't know why, but I was just craving bakery. I mean, after 30 days, I hadn't eaten bread in 30 days, like over 30 days. My God. Every time I walk into a grocery shop, I could smell bakery. That's the only thing that was pulling me to that side. I don't know what is it about bakery, but oh my God. Like, okay, that was the only thing I was looking forward to. Anything soft and bakery. Oh God, bread of life. Lord save me. So do be careful with that. I was really craving something. Oh God. I remember it vividly, crystal clear. I always talk about food. It's just making me... Anyway, another thing is plan it. Plan it. Put it on paper. Put it on paper and know what you are going to pray about. List it. Know what you're going to pray about. Have sessions where you will pray about certain things. If you want to focus on being more financially stable, or whatever the case may be, or not be less distracted by materialism, because it is a problem, then you got to introspect yourself a lot closer. Why am I so... If you overspend on certain things, then you need to introspect yourself. What's my need to want to buy Jordan sneakers or something. Nothing wrong with Jordans. Love Michael Jordan. But can you afford them? Pray about that. Let's talk about it. But have a plan. Break it down into segments. Pray about those type of things so you can remain focused. Another thing is there is an increase in appetite. Okay, I lost a lot of weight. I lost a lot of weight. I got to a point where I could literally fit my waist. Both my thumbs could connect at the back, and my fingertips go around my belly. Okay, that's how empty I was. I could not believe it. I had such a small waist and abs. I was in a boys' camp, and one of the brothers was like, saw me without a shirt. It was like, yo, dude, you have like extreme abs, man. Like, what is that? And I'm like, if only you knew. So yeah, my waist could fit inside that much. I'm not kidding you. That's how extreme. On the 30th day, I think it was the 31st day, that's when I knew that's wow. Please don't try to lose weight by like fasting for 30 days. The point is there's an increased appetite. You'll experience a sense of increased appetite, and you need to be very careful because you might start consuming food a lot more than before. So you gotta be careful. So do be careful when you do break your fast, and do moderate your appetite levels because it can get a little tricky and it can get a little out there. Anyway, I hope you guys have learned something about fasting. A lot of the things that I learned, I hope they're able to enrich you guys as well. And when you do go into fasting or into prayer, I hope that also helps you to build a better relationship with God. And with that said, this is the Jesus Culture. It's about truth, about tradition. And I hope you guys, stay tuned for more videos that I'll be making. And if you haven't liked the video yet, please do remember to like the video. Do me a solid one, please. Hit the subscribe button. And while you're at it, notification bell. Then you'll know when I've released a video. I hope to see you guys next time on my next video. And God bless.